Somewhere along the way, many of us have been told that trusting our gut was irresponsible, just being emotional, or even anxiety in disguise. But have you ever had a feeling about something, maybe a person, a decision, or a situation, and later thought, I knew it? You couldn't have explained at the time if you were asked. There was no proof. It didn't seem quite logical at the time, but somehow you just knew. And if you happen to be one of those people who tends to overthink things, hello me, you might have questioned that feeling. Am I overreacting to something here? Am I just feeling anxious? And like that should matter, really, because a gut feeling is a gut feeling. And if you feel it, it's real and it's worth paying attention to. Maybe, on the other hand, you get this all the time and you don't ignore it. You sit with it and you explore it a little before you move on. Either way, this week I want to talk about that Jedi mind trick, that ninja superpower, otherwise known as intuition. What it is, where it comes from, and why listening to it and trusting it isn't woo-woo at all. Because intuition isn't a mystical superpower that only some of us have. It's just information delivered to us from our subconscious parts of our brain. And it's real. So let's dig into that. You know how life throws us curveballs? Nobody gets through this journey of life without a few storms. Welcome to Transformative Journeys. I'm your host, Joanna LaRue. Each week, I'll share my thoughts and insights and dig into strategies that can empower you to rediscover yourself, learn about transforming pain into power, building confidence to navigate life's challenges, and cultivating a life of meaning and joy. Join me on this journey of exploration and transformation. Welcome back to Transformative Journeys with Joanna. I'm your host, Joanna, and I had a hunch that this would be a fun and interesting topic to get into after the somewhat heavier topic last week. So what do I actually mean when I say intuition? I'm not talking about psychic powers, not because I don't believe in them. That's just not my lane. And it's not manifesting the best parking lot at work, and I've been known to play with that sometimes too. I'm talking about those gut feelings we sometimes get, the ones that often manifest as a tightening in your stomach, a heaviness or openness in your chest, a sudden feeling of calm, or a subtle feeling that something's just off. Although there's many ways of experiencing gut feelings, the reason we call them feelings is because they often show up physically before our brains catch up. My husband calls them his spidey senses. And it really isn't our imagination playing tricks on us. Although if you dig deep enough into what's going on in your brain when it happens, you might be able to put in the argument that it kind of is our imagination at work. It's our brain doing what our brain's designed to do. Constantly scan our environment for patterns, familiarity, safety, even when we're not consciously aware of it. And it alerts us when something's out of the ordinary is going on. And it doesn't just scream danger. It delivers the message in a quieter language. When we understand better how it does that, neurologically, psychologically, and physiologically, it becomes way less mysterious, way less woo-woo, and makes sense for us to start trusting it more. And since I'm notoriously bad for questioning my gut feelings, worrying that I'm just reacting irrationally, being anxious, or reacting emotionally. I wanted to understand how that works. So I did a bit of digging into how our brain and nervous system do all that, gather all that information and send the signals before our conscious mind catches up. What I found out was that it works very much like the stuff I talked about in episode 17 on emotional intelligence and why naming and feeling our emotions can help us heal. And it turns out that I was actually right about some of that wondering, but in a good way. And that when it comes to intuition, I've been fighting against something I already knew how to do, something I do all the time. My ability to sit with uncomfortable feelings, explore where they're coming from, and trust what I'm feeling. So let's look a little deeper at what intuition actually is. And don't worry, you can put away your crystal ball and tarot cards for now. Like I said, our brains constantly and unconsciously scan our environment for patterns, things that it can compare to our previous experiences, things that are familiar or not, and knowledge we already have, all in its non-stop attempt to keep us safe. Our sensory system, which includes our thalamus and that good old amygdala, literally process vast amounts of information faster than the thinking part of our brain can do. Stuff like things that are similar to past experiences, social cues, micro expressions and body position or movement, environmental signals like movement, sounds, smells, which actually aren't caught by the thalamus. I was like this many years old today when I found out that scents actually go straight to our amygdala. They don't go through the thalamus first, which I thought was kind of cool. Anyways, and also the context we're experiencing all of those things in. And our brain processes all of this external data faster than lightning, way, way before our conscious mind has time to turn them into thoughts. A bit like your brain doing complex math in the background without an equation, and intuition is the answer popping up without knowing specifically what the question was. It's not magic. It's not mystical, arcane knowledge from the cosmos. It's merely subconscious processing that's informed by our lived experience, our stored memories, and often very subtle cues. More like a highly sensitive and sophisticated GPS than a Jedi mind trick. So why do we confuse intuition with anxiety or fear? Basically, because they both show up in similar ways with similar physiological responses. You know, those sudden, seemingly unexplainable, ishy or tight feelings in our stomach, heavy feeling in our chest, or for good gut feelings, an openness or lightness in our chest, tense feelings that tend to show up in our neck or shoulders, a sudden sense of unease or of complete calm. That's why we call them gut feelings, because they often show up in our body first. And many people report that their stomach is the first to get the news. They bypass rational thought at first, but when you slow down and pay closer attention to them, even though intuition feels similar at first, it actually sounds and feels quite different from anxiety and fear. So how do I best break that down? Anxiety tends to feel kind of loud, urgent, panicky. It tends to be repetitive and want immediate action or reassurance. It spirals quickly into what ifs. It can feel chaotic, insistent, cause us to start catastrophizing, and escalates quickly when you feel it. Whereas intuition leans more towards arriving noticeably and maybe quickly, but more quietly. It says something is off or this doesn't feel right. It's more of a steady feeling or a grounded feeling, even if it's uncomfortable. It tends to stay a consistent feeling that doesn't escalate over time, and it allows space for reflection and doesn't necessarily feel like it needs to be addressed right now. So intuition sort of whispers to us, whereas anxiety tends to shout. And if you already struggle with anxiety, or if your mind chatter is loud, or you're overwhelmed, overstimulated, hello social media, or chronically stressed, those whispers are easily missed and often ignored. So here's a few checkpoints that might help you discern whether you're feeling anxiety or intuition. Does this feeling feel calm but noticeable? Intuition. Or panicked and urgent? Anxiety. Does it feel sort of centered in one part of your body? Intuition. Or is it spreading and amplifying and snowballing? Anxiety. Does it get quieter when I pause to consider it? Intuition. Or louder when I stop to think about it? Anxiety. Is it just asking you to thoughtfully pay attention to what's going on? Intuition. Or is it pressuring me for immediate action? Anxiety. And is the feeling staying consistent over time? Intuition. Or is it escalating and morphing towards alarm? Anxiety. Intuition doesn't typically demand instant action. Anxiety almost always does. Okay, I want to get into a quick side chat around precognition and extrasensory perception, or ESP, because I think it deserves a little bit of attention here, whether you believe in it or not. Precognition comes from the Latin derivatives pre, P-R-A-E, meaning before, and cognitio, meaning knowing. So it means to know beforehand. There are countless accounts of people avoiding harm because something didn't feel right. Sometimes the word intuition is used. Sometimes they've said, I just had a feeling. And sometimes they've said they received a telepathic or psychic message. Unfortunately, because I personally would love to see scientific proof of these abilities emerge, scientifically, there is no proof of precognition, and it's currently considered pseudoscience. Personally, I'm not burning the whole concept to the ground. I'm very open to all kinds of things that currently defy scientific explanation. Seriously, 1,000 years ago, we thought we could sail off the edge of the ocean, and a few hundred years ago, we didn't know what a germ or virus was, right? Anyways, I'm not taking it off the table here as a possibility, just saying that we can't reliably measure it or replicate it. But we do already know that our human nervous system is exceptionally good at detecting subtle cues from our environment long before our conscious awareness catches on. Have you checked out any of my free resources yet? I've developed these guides and toolkits to help you wherever you are on your journey, from resilience to mindfulness to grief support. I've created these resources with you in mind because we may not be on the same path at the same time, but we're all on this journey together. Grab them free at transformativejourneys.ca or just scroll down to the link in the show notes. So maybe you're saying to yourself, I don't have intuition, or my intuition sucks. It's not that you don't have it. It's built into our brains. It's that we live in a world that's so full of noise and distraction. Constant stimulation and often overstimulation, endless flow of information, useful or not, a society that wants us to justify or defend our feelings, pressure to people please. We're also told not to judge a book by its cover. And maybe most of all, many of us were taught or live and work in environments, whether it's explicit or implicit, that make us constantly feel like we need to cognitively read people or the room, which makes second guessing ourselves all too easily or all too easy, and trusting our feelings much, much harder. Our rational mind, the part that we use to read people or read the room, doesn't much like touchy-feely, imprecise stuff like feelings. So what we do instead of leaning in to pay attention to those gut feelings or first impressions, we train ourselves, or we get trained to, whichever way you want to look at it, to override or ignore intuition. But every time you acknowledge one of those internal signals, whether you specifically do something about it or not, you start to build self-trust. That feeling part of our brain, the part that scans for those external cues and sends signals to our body, it starts to learn that it's going to be heard and paid attention to. It starts to realize that it doesn't have to scream to get attention the way anxiety does. It learns that you are willing to slow down and consider what it's telling you. And the more you do it, the more you answer its call, the less you will confuse it with anxiety. You can teach yourself to interpret those signs and signals as safety, which is what calms our nervous system in the first place. How do you begin to do that? One of my favorite tools is one we've talked about here many, many times. One that can be a powerful way to help you calm some of the mental chatter, overstimulation, information overload, and burying of feelings that so many of us have in the background constantly. I'm talking about mindfulness, of course, not as a spiritual practice, as a practical one, because mindfulness helps quiet mental chatter. It helps to soothe overstimulation. It helps us shut out mental overload for a little while, and it gives us time to calm emotions so we can kind of dispassionately examine them with some perspective. It can be as simple as taking a few slow, deep breaths and asking yourself, what am I feeling in my body right now? Not to judge it, not necessarily to understand what it means right away, just to notice and acknowledge that it's there. It might be a little more intentional by slowing right down and taking a few minutes to do something with focus and purpose and intention in order to disengage and allow yourself space before coming back to explore what's behind the feeling. And if you want some more practical ways to explore mindfulness or for other purposes and areas of your life, I did a really great podcast episode, if I do say so myself, in episode 7. All right. If you have a notebook or paper handy, here are a few reflection prompts that you can journal out, take on your walk with you, make it kind. This is about learning, not about self-blame or recriminations. But ask yourself, can you recall a time you had a gut feeling and ignored it? What happened as a result? How did your body try to get your attention? And what would it look like to trust yourself one notch more next time? You're not going to be right every single time, but be willing to listen to the whispers. This week I talked about intuition or gut feelings, what it is, how we sometimes confuse it with other feelings or ignore it altogether, and why it's important to start listening a little closer to some of the subtle nudges from our body. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. Intuition isn't mystical. It's not some Jedi superpower, and it's not irrational. You don't have to obey it blindly or act on every feeling. Sometimes our intuition is off or based on data that doesn't actually apply to the current situation. But when it comes down to it, that's what it is. It's data. It just comes from a part of you that processes information faster than our thoughts can keep up with. And it's something we all have if we slow down and allow ourselves to become aware of its messages. Thank you for being here with me today. Come say hi to me on Instagram at transformativejourneys.joanna or visit my website. Say hi to me there. Did you know that I do an enhanced version of this podcast on YouTube? Not quite ready to go live yet. Sometime this year, I'm working up to it. But in the meantime, I'm creating this for you with on-screen prompts, beautiful visuals, and a more immersive experience. Head over to my YouTube channel, Transformative Journeys, to check it out. If you've got an idea you'd like me to talk about, leave me a message and you might just see it in a future episode. And last, as always, please subscribe, like, comment. It all helps my podcast get noticed. I will make you a deal. You do all the things, and I will keep dropping the best of what's in my heart and my slightly sarcastic soul so we can keep learning together. Until next time, this is Joanna reminding you that it doesn't matter if you fall. What matters is how well you bounce. This is Transformative Journeys. See you next time. Your support helps me keep creating free tools and honest conversations. Because let's be real, even when you love what you're doing, sometimes it takes a whole lot of metaphorical duct tape to hold it all together. If you'd like to toss a little love into the duct tape fund, you can now support the podcast at buymeacoffee.com. I'll put a link in the show notes. Just wanted to throw in a disclaimer. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and should not replace the advice of a medical or mental health expert. I'm not a licensed counselor or a therapist, just a human with a mic and a story of growth and resilience. No degree, no fancy letters after my name. I'm a full-time student at the School of Hard Knocks, University of Life, where I figure I'll graduate when I take my last breath. In other words, I'm just Joanna, a fellow human being on my journey through this thing called life, and your concierge on this transformative journey.